Yeah,
You
it's
know?
just this school computer
Yeah.
situation.
Everybody chooses.
Hello, internet. So last class we made this t-shirt, and we used the overlapping technique that So Heidi mentioned, where we drew a shape that is much bigger than we needed, and originally it was in the front, right? It looked like this, and then we sent it to back. Or we could reflect it first and send it to the back. Something I want to say is when we drew this anchor point right here lined up with the shoulder anchor point, right? And we need to get those exactly aligned, and we could fudge it in just until we thought it looked good, and that would be fine. But we can be sure it's exactly aligned by, I'm on the black selection tool, what does the black selection tool do versus the white one?
Isn't like the white one like anchor?
Exactly. So the black one,
It's just like handles or something.
no, it selects everything, the whole
Okay.
shape. The white one is for anchor points and handles
Okay.
and curves, any kind of like editing of the actual shape. But the black one is going to move the whole object. So we don't normally select anchor points with the black one, but in this case we're going to. And it's hard to see up there, but when I hover over this anchor point, a little word anchor shows up, and that's because I have my smart guides on. View smart guides is checked off. So if I click right there with my black selection tool, I'm going to move the whole shape, but I will know it's perfectly aligned with this shoulder when this cursor turns white. So can you guys see how it's not white over here, but as soon as I get it lined up with that anchor point, it snaps to it and the cursor turns white. So I can release there, and I can be confident that it is going to line up perfectly, essentially. So now we can reflect it, and the most straightforward way to reflect, we can get into like faster ways of doing this later on, but the most straightforward way is to go to Object, Transform, and choose Reflect. And then we can check Preview to make sure that it is flipping vertically over the vertical axis, and then we're going to hit Copy because we need to make two sleeves. But the sleeves are a mirrored image of each other. And then we can just slide this over until it lines up. If we want to, we can just release it when we think it looks good, or if we want to, we can use that technique. So I'm hovering over this anchor point, and I can see the little word anchor popping up, and I'm using my black selection tool, so it's going to move the whole shape, and I click and drag, and when my cursor turns white, I know it's lined up, and I can release. And then we can just select them both, and go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. Or right-click, Arrange, Send to Back. Arrange and Transform are both under the right-click function. I recommend having right-click enabled. Like, this is your first time sitting at this computer, you should check if right-click is on, and then set it up again. Right, it's under Settings or System Preferences, and then Mouse. Okay, so that's one option for drawing sleeves. She also did a technique where she copied and pasted this line, and this creates a much more precise drawing. And this is just really how I'm going to review the difference between copying and pasting with the black selection tool and copying and pasting with the white selection tool. This isn't actually my favorite way to make flats, but when you copy and paste with the black selection tool, what happens? Are you familiar? Copies the whole object. Yes. I thought it was going to be an easy one, guys. Copies the whole... Yes, you're right. Copies the whole object. Right, so that's with the black selection tool, where I click on an object, and I'm doing Command-C and Command-V, and it's copying the whole thing. So instead of that, we are going to use the white selection tool. And when you copy and paste with the white selection tool, if you copy and paste an anchor point, you get both sides of the anchor point, both line segments that the anchor point is connected to. Where if you copy a line segment, I've clicked on this line segment, and I can kind of tell it's selected because there are handles that have appeared. But if you click on a straight line segment, no handles appear because there are no handles, and also it is still selected. But anyway, we're going to click on this curve and we're going to do copy and paste. And now we get this curve exactly. And then we could line it up and draw our sleeve off of it. So you grab the pen tool, and if you hover over something with the pen tool and it gets a slash next to it, it's hard to see because it's intersecting with the line. When I hover over this anchor point, it turns from a star next to the pen tool to a slash. And then we can draw the line. So let's do the same thing over here really quick. You could definitely reflect, but just to practice, if I copy and paste this, go to Edit, Copy, Edit. When I choose Paste, it just pastes it in the center of my viewpoint, wherever that is. Spam, sorry. We can instead go to Edit, Paste in Front, or Paste in Place, and it pastes it exactly where it was copied from. So then drawing this sleeve, we know it's exactly aligned. You might not use this technique.
Do edit paste in front and it'll align.
Yeah, edit paste in front. That is handy to know, because we're going to use edit paste in front in order to make things like collars later on. We have to draw a front and a back, and I think I should do that for the t-shirt before I move on. So sometimes it's nice to start a new artboard when you are drawing the back. It's not required, but it's an option. So the artboard tool it looks like a page with like a crosshairs on it, and we can come up to the top here and choose the new artboard symbol, which looks like the new layer symbol in Photoshop. It just means new in a lot of Illustrator programs. It's like a square with a corner cut off. So we're on the artboard tool and we click this little symbol and we get a second page. So this is nice. You can pretty effectively design your whole collection in one Illustrator file by just like expanding more and more artboards, which a lot of you guys I know are going to be comfortable with that from working on collections in digital tools for textile design. Yeah.
I just had a question. How did you get like the curve of the armhole like so precise? Like I'm trying to do it and it looks more like
Like when I drew the t-shirt.
yeah, like how did you get the armholes like nice and
Let's draw the t-shirt again. You start at the center, then we can leave a little butt in there so we can fix that at the end. And click, click, and then sometimes I will add a curved anchor point here. But remember, curved anchor points are, you click and drag with them. So I can add one here, or I can add it down here. I think it's simplest to kind of add it right here, and you click and drag, and then you get a curve. And then you can click on under the armhole. So it's just a matter of clicking and dragging. And then I had a random line down there that I connected to. Yeah, if you are uncomfortable clicking and dragging, you can convert. So like if you are like, I don't even like clicking and dragging out my first one, we can leave these all all just corner points. So none of these have any curve on them. And then we can convert them. We just switch to our white selection tool, which allows us to select an anchor point. And then in the properties panel, you can choose to convert that to smooth. And then you could like drag out these handles. So if you're uncomfortable with the pen tool, that's an option. So same thing, I can do it for this center point. I just come up and I click convert and it adds handles and I just have to sort out where the handles live. So let's also add a curve on the bottom of this. So let's reflect it now. The most straightforward way to reflect it is object, transform, reflect, and then you hit copy. It's reflecting over the vertical axes. And then we can use that line up your anchor point technique that I've been talking about, where we're moving it with the black selection tool, but we're looking for it to snap to a matching anchor point. But we've got that beautiful butt shape in our flats, which there is actually a video on the Moodle, also by So Heidi, where she just explains how to get rid of the butt shape. So if that's what you're struggling with, there it is, a very concise So Heidi video, not anything like my lectures. We need to join this shape together. Right now, if we needed to change the neckline, it would be hard. We would have to like change both anchor points, and that's annoying. So I am going to select both of them by clicking and dragging a little like selection box. I'm just like clicking and dragging down to the right with my white selection tool, and I want to be sure to only select these anchor points. If I accidentally select like the anchor points from the neckline, things are going to get really wonky really fast. We are only selecting two endpoints. Right? If we select a corner point and an end point, it's not going to let us join them together. If we select two corner points, it's not going to let us join them together. So we need two endpoints and then right-click average, right? If we just choose right-click join right now, remember, this isn't what we should always choose average first, but if we did forget and we chose join, we would still end up with two anchor points here, which is annoying. And if we went to subtract one, things get lopsided. The pen tool will automatically subtract an anchor point, but things just get wonky. So instead, we select them both, dragging a little selection box with my white selection tool. We go right-click average, and we average it in both directions. And now they're right on top of each other. This means that when I choose right-click and join, they are going to be exactly on top of each other. So Heidi has this really fancy keyboard shortcut that involves pressing about 5 buttons at once that will average and join anchor points with just one keyboard shortcut. But I have never been able to retain those 5 keys.
I got 5 fingers.
I think it's more like 4. I don't know. It's a lot of keys. It's probably she does probably mention it in this butt shape video. Yes.
Sorry.
No, please ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I did it, it kind of just like, it like made this half circle shape on top. Like, I don't know what happened.
Interesting. Let me peek. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't know what you did either.
So like, am I supposed to be on the white section?
Yeah, click and drag. Show me where you. Oh, these shapes might be closed. Maybe we work it out in a second.
Okay.
Do you guys have any questions?
How do we get it to be smooth?
Yeah, we just have to select that anchor point and then hit the smooth button. Let me tell you this. Oh yeah. Yeah, you actually have, this is fun, you have not, the front center should have no line on it, right? So when you're trying to join, it's like trying to join like these endpoints together or something.
So I should have a line there.
You should have a line there
Okay.
and no line down the front center. So that's why I start drawing the t-shirts in a very specific way where you want to start and end your line for most flats on that center guideline that I dragged out. So we select this anchor point and we choose smooth up in the control panel. Remember, I work on layouts. I think layout shows the most useful panels automatically, but your programs will probably launch in essentials, and it's actually like fine for you to work in essentials. If you want to work over here, it's just whenever I'm talking about the properties panel, your properties panel is actually going to be on the right.
So where's the smooth button again?
So, are you working on layout?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in the top left. It's next to the word convert, and there's like a corner button where we would make it a corner, and then a smooth button where we would make it a smoothie. Smoothing anchor point. So we are also going to join the bottom. Right now, these anchor points, there's still 2 here. And that's annoying if we wanted to make this longer, and also there's still a butt shape there, and that's not great. But if I wanted to select both of these anchor points, you guys are going to be tempted to click into your filled shape and drag down, trying to drag a selection box, but I need to start my selection box outside here and click and drag up, and now I have only these 2 selected. This is subtle, but I can tell that only those 2 center anchor points are selected because they are filled with red. Let me change the color of the shirt. They are filled with red, and these anchor points on the outside, it is so subtle, but when I hover over them, they get bigger actually. That is a white anchor point, so it is not selected. Okay? So we choose them, we choose right click, average, right click, join. And then we can choose our convert to smooth button up at the top, and we have a nice smooth anchor point. Questions on making the t-shirt so far? Let me get its sleeves back. We're gonna make the back of the t-shirt now. And actually, before we do, you would be able to see the back of the t-shirt in this image. So I am actually going to copy and paste this. So I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and Edit, Paste in Back. And then without deselecting, I can raise the back of the neckline. Edit.
How do you make it a little bit curved? Oh.
You got it? And so now we have, you're essentially, however you get there, you're trying to get a layer in the back that has a higher neckline, right? Because if you, basically in all traditional shirts, the back of the neck has a higher neckline, less of a curve, right? Because the front of your body has more volume to it than the back of your body.
Unless you're equal.
I guess unless you're equal, whatever that means.
No, Igor.
Oh, Igor. Yes, you're right. And then he has specially made shirts. Let's put some sew lines on this before we make the back. And let's also draw a collar. So we are going to copy and paste some of these lines in order to do this. So if I want a curved line that perfectly reflects this curved line that I've worked so hard on, we're going to do Command C and Command F, or Edit, Paste in Front, right? And then I can use my arrow keys actually to move this line upwards. And then we are going to use the stroke panel. Okay, if you don't have it out, you can go to Window, Stroke to find this panel. But here it is. I'll drag it out onto the screen. And with this, we can do a few things with the stroke. And we actually do, we want to apply a dashed line mainly. That's the main goal. So I'm going to check off dashed line, and then something like a 2-point dash and a 2-point gap, an even dash and an even gap. Oops, I forgot to have this selected. So with the line selected, we're going to check off dashed line, and we get this this stitch line. Okay, but it doesn't really look that great how these are like solid rectangles, so we put a round cap on them. Okay, and if you want to, you could make these amounts bigger, so we could do a 4-point dash and a 4-point gap if you felt like that was the more appropriate stitch scale. But 2-point and 2-point I think is pretty standard. Now, things that I end up taking points off for are like when people, it's not such a big deal on this shirt, but a lot of times these shapes, when you copy and paste them, will end up going outside of the line. So you're going to want to use your white selection tool and just make sure that the line touches the outside edge. It should line up with the outside edge. Also, something that's important to note is that when I copied and pasted this line, this was still left with a fill on it. So it's also good practice to make sure that your stitch lines don't have any fill on them.
How do you see that?
Well, it's filled with green,
The
but
fill.
you can tell over here, and I do want to address the fill and stroke buttons over here because I have that written down. So the fill is in the front right now, and so if we want there to be no color on there, we can click the Ghostbusters tool button there, the slash, and that puts no fill in there. Right, or we can choose a new color over here and it'll be filled with a new color. If we want to change the stroke color, we need to make sure that the stroke is in the front, right? So this little button is the stroke button, and then we can click on a new color or whatever, and we will have the stroke. So you can tell it's the stroke because it's got a hole in the middle, and you can tell this is the fill because it's solid all the way through. And whichever of these are in the front, these are going to be the colors that you're picking. So let's set this back to a black fill. Do the fill and stroke buttons make sense? Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right, we are going to copy and paste these guys and probably the top really quick. And I was supposed to go over making pants and skirts today, but I feel like I've talked a lot about t-shirts again. We can copy these settings by using the eyedropper tool in Illustrator. In Illustrator, the eyedropper tool doesn't just copy the color, it copies like all of the settings that are applied. So if we have this line selected and we want it to be a stitch line, we can click and it automatically adopts those. Technically, all of these lines would be double stitch, so we could put 2 stitches right next to each other.
So it's a memory bank of each point.
Well, it's just going to copy whatever you click on, right? So if I draw a line like this, and I grab the eyedropper tool and click on this green shape with a solid colored black outline, then this is also going to be a green filled shape with a solid colored black outline. So let's reflect these. edit, objects, transform, reflect, and we can hit copy and then slide them over. And then let's do a collar really quick. I'll also duplicate that guy. So we can start by copying and pasting this line to make the collar. Again, I'm selecting a center anchor point, and then it's going to copy the line segments to both sides. So that's a great reason to have joined your shapes into one shape. This guy needs to have no fill on it. Right now it's filled with purple, and when I put it up here, it's interacting with things. So I click on the fill, and I click on the Ghostbusters symbol in my tool panel. And now I can adjust the anchor points. I am making kind of like the most basic collar right now. We can get into like more advanced collars later, but we would want to do the same thing for the back. So I'm doing Command C and Command F for paste in front, and then we got to make sure that there's no fill on it. And for good measure, we can bring the edges up and match it to the outside. And now when we go to make a back view of this, that will already be set up. So I'm going to copy everything. If I hold Alt, see how my cursor changes into another symbol? I'm just on the black selection tool and I'm holding Alt, and then I get two, like a black cursor and a white cursor next to each other, and all that means is that it's going to copy if you click and drag right now. So I'm holding Alt, and I'm dragging, and I'm releasing over here, and now we have a copy. You could also just select it all and go to Edit Copy, Edit Paste, or Command C, or Command V. But holding Alt is a really fast way to copy things by dragging them. And then we just have to delete the front view and the front neckline of this, and we have the back view. And in our final presentation, we would probably arrange these in a fun way. So I'm going to shut off the guide layer that I made, and we would display these next to each other, right? Probably overlapping, but this is the idea. You don't have, I can group things together to make them easier to join. But you don't have the body showing in your final presentation, just to give you an idea of like where we're going.
How do you delete the bodice?
I
Yeah,
just,
'cause we had ours in the back, right?
your bodice in the,
Yeah, like I can't move mine.
oh, the human,
Yeah.
you can shut off the layer. This lady.
We locked them.
You can still click, there's not an eyeball anymore, but mine is still locked and I'm able to shut it off and it's like still locked. You just click where the eyeball should be.
Possess computers.
Alright, I really want to make a skirt for you guys and a pair of pants for you guys, but do you have questions so far? Okay. Tonight for homework, you are going to have to draw the outlines, the basic silhouettes of your designs. So you're drawing flats in Illustrator, but you don't have to have any stitch lines on them yet. You don't have to have buttons on them yet. They're just the basic shapes of your garments for this collection. So let's draw some pants or skirts. We'll draw the skirt first because it's going to be so easy. This layer is now kind of like my shirts layer. So I can even double click on the layer and rename it shirts. And then I can make a new layer, and I could choose to lock my shirts layer. I could make a new layer and name this skirt, and we're going to draw the skirt on here. So waistlines tend to be flat across on pants and skirts. You don't get like that higher and lower back effect that you do on the t-shirt. And again, with all of these, I am starting on the center line and I am tracing just 1/2. And then we're going to join the 2 halves together. So to get a curve on her hip, I'm going to click and drag downwards here to get a curve. And this is automatically filling, which I am not afraid of. I am used to it. But if you are uncomfortable with it automatically filling with color, even while you're using the pen tool, you can adjust the fill and stroke over here in the tool panel. So I can click on the fill to make sure it's in the front, and then choose the Ghostbusters symbol, and now I don't have any fill. So let's take this down into like a slight A-line, and then I'm going to make a curve like this. Okay, so thus far we have only reflected things by going to Object or Transform Reflect, and that is a totally acceptable way to reflect things. But if you use the Reflect tool, which is maybe hiding underneath the Rotate tool in your toolbar, maybe, if you grab the Reflect tool, I just want to make sure it's going to work right. Yeah, all right, I think it is working right, but you have to make sure you have these objects selected with the black selection tool. If I reflect with the white selection tool, like if I go to Object, Transform, Reflect right now, like nothing's gonna, sometimes it'll just like mess things up, like it'll wonk things around in the handles. So we need to make sure we're on the black selection tool. We have the whole shape selected. Okay. And we are going to go to, I feel like I have 2 layers here. That's weird. We are going to go to the reflection tool, and we are going to hold Alt or Option click on the guideline. You can actually Option click anywhere on the guideline. I can Option click up here. And vertical should still be selected. And now if we toggle preview, we can see that it's flipping across the center line automatically. Okay, so I'm going to hit copy. All right, so all I did is I had a shape, like if I want to reflect this ellipse, let's make it have some color. If I want to reflect this ellipse and have it be in the exact same spot, like over her boob, we grab the Reflect tool and we Option click on the center line, Alt click, and we hit copy, and it's instantly in the same exact place. You don't have to do any of the sliding. So don't worry about that if you're comfortable using Object, Transform, Reflect, and then sliding things over, but that's like one way of doing it, the Reflect tool. So now we are going to join these shapes together, right? If I filled these right now, it might look fine on the screen with them filled, but what ends up happening is that if you haven't properly joined your shapes and you go to print, the printer will put like a really fine blue line or white line through your solid. What looks like a perfectly solid blue dress will have a glitch line through it. So we got to join. So I select both of them and then right click average and right click join. And honestly, this anchor point, we could just remove it altogether. So with my pen tool, I could just click to get rid of this because this line is totally flat, but that's up to you. And then we're going to join the bottom anchor point together too. Okay, so they are 2 separate ones right now. Right click, average, right click, join. Right click, average, right click, join. It's how you make 2 end anchor points 1. Not just any 2 anchor points, right? I bet you guys have experienced selecting the whole shape with the white selection tool and then going to right click average and hitting OK, and the whole thing becoming this ball of nothingness right here. That is because every single anchor point is now on the same exact spot. So only want to select the 2 endpoints when you're trying to join. We're going to add some fullness to the bottom of this skirt by adding anchor points to the bottom. So if I'm on my pen tool, the pen tool will automatically add anchor points. So I'm going to add, oh, it's not working. Why aren't you working? All right, it seems like it wanted me to have the object selected, and now it's gonna add anchor points for me. I'm looking for a plus next to my pen tool, and that means it's gonna add an anchor point. So now I'm gonna click. There we go. That's what it should look like. So I'm gonna add like 3 on each side just to keep it simple. And now we are going to grab the handles of these. As long as my center anchor point had some curve in it, as long as this one had handles, all of these other anchor points I've added are on a curved line, so they also have handles. So I'm going to grab the handles, not the anchor points, and I'm going to twist the handles around so that we have this like wavy motion in the bottom. Okay, so this is subtle. I'm not clicking on an anchor point, which is a square. I'm clicking on a handle, which is a circle, and connected to the anchor point by thin lines. And again, I'm using my white selection tool, and we're adjusting. Okay, so this has already added like a lot of movement to the skirt, but we don't have any fullness lines, which are an important technique when illustrating fabric. So to get the lines, I'm just going to grab the line tool, the line segment tool. We could add these lines with the pen tool, but this is an opportunity to introduce another tool. So it lives under the rectangle tool. And I can click on some of these anchor points or wherever I think the style line needs to start from and drag upwards and get like a variety of heights in there.
Think you should do it with the pen, or is that just another option?
Yeah, it's just another option. You definitely can do it with the pen. With the pen tool, what I would have to do is hit enter every time or return every time, right? So I have to like click, and then it's like, you want to make another line? And I'm like, no, I'm going to hit enter. So it should maybe a little bit faster. So that's how I make a skirt. We can add stitch lines to the skirt, but the problem with, like, if we just tried to copy and paste all of these line segments, they all end up being separate, which is like not the end of the world. Like if I choose copy and then paste, I can move it over here, but I'll show you with the black selection tool that these are all separate little segments. So sometimes when you go to apply the stitch line to them, so remember in my stroke panel, I can check off dashed line and give it a round cap. Sometimes when you do that, it like doesn't look that nice, or sometimes it's just a hassle. You don't want to end up with all of these little pieces. So the best way around that is to actually copy and paste this whole shape. So edit copy, edit paste, and then I'm going to grab my white selection tool and delete all the upper anchor points. Okay, so I'm just hitting delete, and that's getting rid of all those anchor points, but this is still joined into one line, which is handy. So then I'm going to remove the fill on it and give it a dashed line with a round cap and plop it in space. This is where,
You just make it smaller.
exactly, yeah, you could probably just hit like just like literally just like drag it in until it lines up with the black selection tool, or you can grab your white selection tool and adjust these manually. It's also good to adjust where these anchor points are hitting, the ones that are like on the curve, right? Because right now, like particularly this one doesn't look realistic. The way that the it's not following the curve appropriately. So just like dragging those so that they line up with the line is really all you need. Yeah. Questions on skirts? We would add a top. We could just draw it right on top, especially if the skirt's going to be all blue. We could draw it right on top. Make that a solid line though. And we're going to talk about all kinds of like more details. Like if we wanted to make this an elastic waist skirt, we would add that detail maybe next class or something. So here's a skirt. Again, you should be saving all of these. Yeah.
If you like when you joined the skirt,
Mm-hmm.
and you like reflected it, how did you have or did you get rid of like the little like mine kind of goes up a little bit and then it goes down.
Like the butt.
Yeah.
I didn't get rid of it. I didn't have one. But So Heidi's YouTube video, what is this, like 1 minute long or less? Oh, it's actually, huh. I thought this was going to be really short, but it's an 8-minute long video. Maybe there's like a specific point where she'll show it to you. It's just selecting the points, right? If we have this shape and we want to turn this into a curved line, we just select it and then we come up to the properties and we choose this smoothie curve up here. All right, I'm going to talk until 11 today and then we'll do 11:15 break. And the back of this skirt, maybe it would have a seam, like where the zipper would be, something like that. But that might be the only difference between the front and the back of the skirt. Like maybe there would be a button there or something. We could draw a tiny button, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's do pants. Pants are pretty straightforward. I'm just going to, again, I'm starting from the center line because I don't want my flats, I want to be able to join my flats together, so I don't want them to have any vertical center line because I need to join the two edges together. And again, I'll just give her a little click and drag, a little curvy anchor point right here at her hip, and then we can come down to the bottom and just like click straight lines around and then come back up and end in the center. I highly recommend that you don't fill pants with a color until you join them, until you join the two sides together, and I'll explain why. But first let's reflect, and I'm going to reflect using the new tool I've been talking about, the reflect tool, and I'm just option clicking on the guideline and making sure it's reflecting over the vertical axes, but then hitting copy and it's automatically in the right spot. And then we need to join our lines together. So we do have two anchor points here and we just need to select both of them. Remember, I'm just like clicking and dragging a little box. We only want these two anchor points selected. The other anchor points should be white, while these two should be filled in with a color. And then right click, average, right click, join. And now they are the same shape. If you want to, you can convert this to a curve and have a little curve on the front of your pants. I don't think it's necessary. You can have it be totally flat across on the front. I think that's personal preference, but I've had some of my graduate professors tell me that you should not have curve on the waistline, and that these should always be flat on the waistline. I'm probably going to be less picky.
What if you have a dart on the side?
That would create a curve. Yeah, exactly. So I think
Like
that,
if
yeah.
if you lay it out
I
like
felt like
this.
her statement was pretty limiting. Like,
Yeah.
you can definitely, like, yeah, you're totally right. If you had, like, front darts here or whatever, you would end up having that. Something interesting has happened right here. I'm on the pen tool, but my symbol is a crosshairs instead. You guys see that? And you're like, this might have happened to you, and then you're like, I don't know how to, like, it's still acting like the pen tool, but for some reason it looks different, and that's upsetting to me. And this is only happening because caps lock is on. So as soon as I turn caps lock off, it turns back to the normal symbol. I don't know why. Maybe some people prefer to work with it as a crosshair. But that's what caps lock does when you're using the pen tool. So the reason why I was saying we shouldn't fill it until we've joined these is because of this, of the crotch and these 2 anchor points at the crotch. If we try to select those and we have a fill on it, like this, if we try to select them with the white anchor point tool, we end up moving the whole shape. And you could probably like select it from the bottom, but it's a struggle. So it's a lot easier if you have no fill on the pants at first. And you can select from the inside then. You can click and drag over them from the inside, and then right-click average, right-click join. And then you could put a fill on it if you wanted to. We'll do a different color. Huh?
Just brought the crotch down.
No, all I did was I joined those 2 anchor points. So these 2 were 2 anchor points for a second ago. So if I did want to do any adjusting of the crotch, I would have had to move 2. So I just joined them, so you don't have to do that. And it's just good practice to make nice closed shapes. This is bothering me that these got moved.
I tried to join the top of my pants and it said this selection object cannot be joined as their invalid object.
So that's indicative of you having, like, maybe you've accidentally drawn a vertical line and they aren't endpoints anymore.
Okay, because I drew a seam up the middle.
Yes, so you won't be able to join. You won't be able to join the 2 if there's a seam. But honestly, with pants, because you are almost always going to have a seam there, it's probably okay to draw that line with pants. Or we would draw it afterwards or whatever.
I guess I would just have to.
Yeah, and you would just reflect it and like have them be 2 separate shapes. But drawing it afterwards is also fine, right? I can grab the pen tool and just put in, what did I do? So I accidentally deleted this anchor point just then. I was trying to make a vertical line with the pen tool, and when I hovered over this anchor point, it gets a minus sign next to it. And when I clicked, it removed it, and then there's no more pant legs. It's now a skirt, right? So if you want to make, if your pen tool is showing a minus sign, and you want to make a new line starting there, and you don't want to subtract an anchor point, you hold Shift, and then it gets that star next to it, and then you click, and it will make a new line starting at that point. So you don't have to start somewhere else. I'm going to make this thicker so it actually shows up. I'll make all the lines thicker on that one, right? So on this one, we have drawn that line in there, and that's totally fine. And on this pant, we drew the line, the vertical line at first, and that's also an okay option. We can just grab the reflect tool, alt-click on the center line, and then hit copy. I had to have it selected first. Yeah.
With the stroke?
So
That's a good point.
One is standard, but working at 11 by 17, it seems like it's pretty small. So if you did want to up it to 2,
I just didn't know if, like, when we turn. Oh, is this for reviews?
actually, no, it's not. It's not. You won't be showing this to reviews,
Okay.
because this class is an elective.
But it's required. But they're not making.
It's actually not required.
Oh.
It's highly recommended.
Oh.
Like they just like kind of encourage everyone to take it,
Oh,
but
okay.
it is technically an elective. The digital tools for textile design is required. At least that was my understanding when I took the job. I don't know if things have changed, honestly.
Well, because they like, I thought they made it mandatory.
Oh, they might have. Things might have changed, and
But I don't know.
maybe I should double check that you aren't showing these at reviews. I think as long as things look balanced, right? Like this is definitely too thick.
Yeah. Okay, but just keep it consistent in all of them.
Yeah.
11 by 17.
In some books, they will have like really specific point widths that they want you to be at, but
I wonder what WGSN uses. 'Cause
Yeah.
I don't see flats in there.
yeah,
What they're-
I wonder too. And it depends on the scale too, right? Like 1 point is gonna look fine when this is smaller, but like we can't really see the outline on 1 point from here. But if we zoom into it, like proportionally, that's kind of correct.
Yeah.
And I think most flats are printed at like 8.5 by 11. Hey, I don't know.
It's not all in one page. It's just-
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was also supposed to make a blouse today. How are you feeling? Do you want me to make a longer sleeve shirt really quick? Yeah, so we're going to adapt the t-shirt to make a longer sleeve shirt. I don't want to have to draw the bodice of the t-shirt again and draw the sleeves again. So I am going to copy the front. Oh, I'll save those pants. Sure. Go over here. I'm going to copy. I'll unlock the shirts layer and copy this guy. So I'm holding Alt and dragging it back onto here.
Oh, also,
Yeah.
with the shirt top, I know that you see the back. 'Cause
Yeah.
Normally it's the scoop and that's lower, but with pants, when you lay them out flat, there is a little bit of like if I lay
Yeah.
the pants out flat, are we drawing that or not? Because when I have like pants on the shirt or the skirt, and I'm not seeing part of the back,
Yeah,
is
I
that
think
not
it's
uniform?
I don't know. I think it's nice to have like if this were a curved top, we can do edit, copy, edit, paste in front, and maybe just like drag these anchor points down. I don't know. I think it is kind of up to you. Some pants, like little kids' pants, where they're just like burp burp, like
Yeah.
those, it's not gonna have that curve on it that you're talking about, right? But like a lady's jean, where like they've specifically made the back higher and bigger, like then it would definitely have that. So,
I'll look at some.
yeah, definitely Googling other samples of flats and seeing how other people have drawn them is like definitely a good option. And I have a lot of flats in here. All right, so this guy, let me actually, first off, I'm gonna remove all of this stitching because we're gonna have to put it back on once we've adjusted. I'm gonna ungroup first. Oops. Come on. Right click, ungroup. And now I'm gonna delete all my stitching. And it's kind of bothering me how these don't line up perfectly, so I'm gonna fix that. I'm just clicking and dragging those anchor points until they line up. Something I wanna say is when you click on an object in the center, and then you go to click and drag on an anchor point, you're going to accidentally move the whole shape. So something that's good to get used to when you're using the white selection tool is to click and then click and drag, right? And you want to see that the anchor point you've clicked on is the only anchor point that's red, right? If I click on the center of a point with fill, or of a shape with fill on it, every single anchor point is filled red, where if I click on this, now only that one is filled red and these ones are white. So we know that one's selected, and when I click and drag, it will only move that one and not the whole shape, just in case you run into that. So let me finish deleting these. We are going to grab the handles, and honestly I only want to adjust one sleeve, so I'm going to delete the other sleeve, and we're going to grab the anchor points at the bottom here, and we can actually hold shift and select more than one anchor point, or you could drag a box around both of them. Either way, I'm looking for both of them to be at the bottom there, and then I'm going to drag this all the way down. So we already have a long sleeve shirts here, and this would be totally fine for just like a long sleeve t-shirt, but I want to make, I'm actually going to adjust this a little tighter. I want to make a shirt where it has like a cuff and then kind of like a flouncy sleeve above the cuff. So to do that, I am going to use the Pathfinder tools. I'm glad I got to the blouse because the Pathfinder tools, so Heidi mentioned them, and I think they require some explanation. If we go to Window Pathfinder, we will see these tools, and these are, I don't know why they're called Pathfinder. In other programs, they might be called something like Boolean logic or like other types of names, but basically this is like if you want to subtract or add one shape to another shape, this is how you could join them together. But we're going to focus on only one button on the Pathfinder panel, and that is divide. So it's the button in the lower left-hand corner, and if you hover over it, it says divide. And for divide to work and to split it in the way that we are going to split this, just like perfectly across a line, we need to draw a line. We need to make sure that this line has no fill and it can have a stroke, but it should have no fill. So I'm going to deselect and then make sure I have no fill and then draw my line across. And you would be tempted, I'm sure, to draw a line that starts on the path and ends on the path and looks like this. But we need to, for Pathfinder divide to work, draw a line that intersects the lines. It should start outside the shape and end outside the shape, okay? So not this, all right? We're going to use this again in a minute, so don't worry. I am going to select both of these, my cutting line and my shape, and then I'm going to choose divide in the Pathfinder panel. Window Pathfinder. I always have a hard time remembering the name Pathfinder. I would write it down. My boyfriend used to play a D&D game called Pathfinder that was popular like before 5th edition D&D came out, so I always associate it with that, and I don't know, that probably doesn't help any of you, but that's how I remember the name. So now this is a grouped shape, but actually if I hover over these, you'll see that they are two separate shapes, but when I click, it selects both of them. Any of the Pathfinder tools are going to leave your shapes in a group, and you just need to ungroup them in order to edit them. So now this is a separate shape, and we could make that a pink cuff or whatever, but we can now adjust this upper sleeve and not have to worry about it. So I'm going to grab there's a couple ways to do this. I think I'm going to grab the pen tool and actually add an anchor point, right? So with with this shape selected, if I grab the pen tool, my pen tool gets a plus next to it when I hover over a line, right? So I can click there. I'm going to add an anchor point there and an anchor point here. And these are going to be corner anchor points. When I click and drag on them, they aren't going to look that good right now. How do we convert these into smooth anchor points? We've talked about it a bunch today. The curved, yeah. Yes, click it's good instructions. Yeah, so I have to select it with the white selection tool, and then up in my properties panel, we convert it to a smoothie. Same thing here, smoothie. And there we have a flouncy shirt, and we could obviously adjust these more now if we were like, wow, that's too much flounce.
What Pathfinder
Yeah.
one did you click on again?
It's the lower left-hand corner called divide. So if you hover over it, it says
And I clicked.
divide, and you have to have the line, the cutting line, and the shape that you want cut selected, and then you should be able to ungroup them.
Okay, I got it.
The cutting line has to be wider than your shape. It has to start and end outside. There are some like newer like Photoshop CC tools that might be able to speed up this process, but Pathfinder is like definitely going to work, and I know how to use it, and it's been around for a long time. So it's the one I'm teaching right now at least, but maybe we'll talk about some other tools later. So let me reflect this. Maybe we would draw some moments first, like if this has a slit in it, something like that, we would draw that. If it's got buttons, maybe we would draw those before we reflected it. But those details can always be added later. So I'm just going to select all of this jazz, and with my reflect tool, I'm going to option click on the center line and hit copy. And then we send all of this to the back. Right click, arrange, send to back. So there's the blouse. Actually, we can draw a different collar on top of it. So I probably would only draw half the collar first. So let's draw the front half first. I'm probably going to start a little bit, well, let me think. Let me look at how other people have illustrated a collared shirt really quick, because I'm like having trouble remembering it, like how it goes. Also, tracing existing clothes is always an option too. Okay, so yeah, we'll do this type collar. So this let's first give it this kind of, let's delete that anchor point that I accidentally drew, and we will copy and paste in place this line, and we will make sure it has no fill, and we'll bring that down, and this is going to be like the under part of the collar, right? It's going to be this part. Let's also draw the vertical line in there. Buttons, the line that buttons make aren't exactly on the center. They're often like off to one side or the other, depending on whether it's a man or a woman's shirt. And now from here, I am going to draw the collar shape on top of it, and then we will attach the back collar. So we are going to start somewhere right here. I'm not on the right tool. And we don't want to continue that line because I'm going to make a perfect little closed collar shape here. But sorry, I just really want to make sure I get this right. Okay. So because I could actually copy this into here, couldn't I? That might be helpful. Maybe. Or it might break the computer. So I guess I was going to say, because these overlap a little bit, because the front and the back, or the left and the right side of the shirt overlap a little bit, the collar actually starts a little bit into, like, towards the center. So let's get this out of here for now and get back over here. And hopefully we can draw just half of it. Okay, so they come over here and they make this a tiny bit curved. And then they come up to this point, and they don't end here. They don't come over to the upper shoulder point. They come up, right? Because your collar doesn't, like, sit on your body. It's stiff. So we can come back up here. Oops, I don't know why it started. Damn, it connected to this line. That's such a struggle. Okay. So we don't want it to connect to that collar line. We can always adjust that later, and then we'll come back here. Let's compare that to theirs, and we can always adjust. So theirs had a lot more curves in it. We can convert some of these anchor points to curved anchor points and then put corners back in them. If I hold Alt, I can adjust this so that it is a corner point again and still have handles that will allow me to play. Okay, so I'm holding Alt to turn these back into corner anchor points with handles. And that's probably a little bit lower. Okay, so let's fill this. Right now it has no stroke or fill. Yeah, getting close. There, that's probably rounded out a little bit more. This probably comes down a tiny bit more. All right, so I'm feeling okay about this collar. Before I reflect it, I'm actually going to draw the back of the collar too. So this is going to require some imagination because we can't see the back right now. But I am going to, again, start at the center. And I want it to line up with this existing collar. And then I also want it to line up with this existing anchor point. So I'm going to try to line those up the best I can. And then right now that anchor point is making a curve upwards. So I can hold Alt and turn this into a corner. And now it'll curve downwards. And we can place that guide. And I'm going to send this to the back. Right-click, arrange, send to back. Okay, so this is what the front should look like. And I'm going to reflect these. Reflect tool, Alt-click on the center, and hit copy. And I just need to adjust this and send it to the back. So there we have our blouse. We would add buttons, but we're going to do that next week because for homework tonight, you don't have to add any of those details yet. You just have to do the silhouettes, which would be like getting all of these shapes made and, you know, making sure that you've closed all your shapes appropriately or whatnots. Let's make a back of this super quick because I have the back collar there, so it'll be really easy. Right now they're two separate shapes, and I could easily join those using the same techniques we've used for the t-shirt and the skirt and the pants. But I'm going to hold Alt and copy a second one. Let me shut off the guide so we don't get distracted by this lady anymore. And I just need to delete some of the front aspects. And this collar should actually be in the front of the package now. Arrange, bring to front.
And the sleeves are backwards.
Yeah, I guess you would remove these. Yeah. And then we would add stitch lines and all that jazz. You know, we could make this into a tuxedo bottom shirt or whatever. All right, questions?
Passing these out.
No. So for homework, like I said, you're gonna make 10 silhouettes of shirts, or of your whole looks, right? So I would actually have only 2 whole looks done at this point. I've got my front and back here, and the pants for it, I would have to make a back version of the pants, and then the front and back top and the skirt for it. So does that make sense?
Can be guys and girls.
Yeah, yep, yeah. It can be whatever gender or target market. If you need a male or a child's croquis to draw on, in today's class, there's something labeled library flat croquis, and when you click on this, it brings you to a list of all like JPEGs and PDFs and PNGs, kind of a mess of file types, but these are like all the different croquis that you can download. Just remember to save them put them on their own layer, right? Don't try to draw on top of your templates. So if I,
Restaurants.
no, you don't have to rasterize, but you want to lock the layer. If I go to like File New and I drag in my my image, like if I download this men's template, well, I guess we'll just make a new artboard. Oh, it's working. So I can drag in the men's template, and we make it the right size. Before we start drawing on top of him, his proportions look weird to me, but well, boys, that is how we draw men in, I don't know, in fashion. But if we started drawing on top of this, then like for example, when we went to join the anchor points at the top and the bottom, when we went to like click and drag around them, our little selection tool, this guy would get in the way all the time and it would be so annoying. And we want to be successful and not try to tear our hair out. So over here, we're going to make a new layer before we start drawing, and we're also going to lock this layer. You can either click on this empty space between the eye and the color, or you can double click and choose templates and hit OK, and that automatically locks it, and it dims the image, which is nice. So that's a template, and if I see you working without a template and you ask me a question, the first thing I'm going to do is make a template layer. I'm not going to be able to function drawing on your screen and you haven't set it up this way. I'm sorry. So just set it up that way from the beginning, guys. All right. That's enough drama. Do we have any other questions on anything to do with this stuff? Okay. Thank you. Good lecture, and we are going to take a break until 11:30. Sorry it was such a long lecture. Yeah.
I pressed this to make the other side of the back. It's not doing it. Okay, it's doing it.
Hit cancel.
I don't know if these settings.
So you are working in essentials. So your properties panel is a tab over here, and then you could click on the new art